Hi, everyone. This is Attorney Lilian with Lily Legal, and I am here today with your immigration chat. This is when we spend time together, talk about an immigration topic. I answer your questions live, and we just get to chatting and get our immigration nerdy stuff on. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about the top three. Okay, top three things that you really, need to have for you to be successful in your green card application. Okay? It doesn't matter if your green card is through marriage. It doesn't matter if it's through your child. It does not matter if it's through the Liberian Green Card Act. All these three things apply no matter what type of situation you have. Okay. So the first thing first, let me introduce myself. Like I said, I'm Attorney Lilian. I am the attorney and owner at Lily Legal, which is an immigration law firm based in Worcester, Massachusetts. However, I get the honor and privilege to represent clients in all 50 states. So even though I'm based in Massachusetts, I am able to represent clients all over the US and all over the world. So that is why I do this. I love what I do. And today, like I said, we'll be talking about the top three keys to a successful green card application. Okay. Again, this is not, green card application through marriage. This applies no matter what type of green card you're applying for, right? No matter who's applying for you, if you're applying for yourself, if your spouse is applying for you, all these things will still apply. Okay. You will still need to have all these things, and this will help you make your case successful. Okay. So let's get started. The first thing, the first thing you need to know before you file anything, okay? If you really, really, really want to be successful, the first thing before you file any application is you need to know your immigration history. This is something that a lot of people don't know or understand what I mean by this. If you do not know your own immigration history, your case is going to suffer. And this is just point blank. There's no, sometimes people want to argue with me about, oh, well, immigration is not going to find out about that. Or, oh, well, it was a long time ago. I came here, 20 years ago. That happened 30 years ago. Immigration wouldn't know. Well, let me tell you something. Immigration knows. Okay. And it's one of those things that I really wish people knew. And that's why I do these lives, because I want you to know what's going on, how it's going to affect you, and how your whole immigration history is looked at by USCIS or the consulate if you're applying outside of the US. So basically, everyone that has went through the U.S. immigration system, whether you came here on a lottery visa, whether you came here through a filing from your spouse, employer, whatever it may be, has one immigration file. It's called an A file, and everything goes in there. If you filed for an I-130 30 years ago, a copy of it a copy of it is in your file. Whatever it is that you filed, it's in your file. If you did if you went and filed for a visitor visa in your home country, and then once you get here you want to file for a green card, just know whatever you put in your filing when you are filing for the visitor visa, US immigration has access to that. They know the information, and they're going to use it to compare what you're telling them now to what you told them then. So that's why this is the number one number one thing you need to do to be successful is know your immigration history. Okay. As always, welcome. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. If you are watching this on the replay, as always, again, put your questions in the comments. I do go back and respond to your comments. And sometimes I even do a whole video responding to your comments. So, as always, I am here to answer your questions. I am not able to give you individual legal advice. If you want individual legal advice, please feel free to reach out. My information will be in the details for this video, and you can reach out and we can set up a consultation where I can actually look at your particular case and give you legal advice. Here, I'm giving you general information that applies to most people that are applying for a green card or that are looking to immigrate to the US. Okay, so know your immigration history. I just want to go into a little more detail about this particular topic because it happens. It happens all the time where I go to an interview and a client didn't tell me something, right? If you have filed, again, I'm going to keep repeating myself. If you have filed a B2 visa, which is the visitor visa, which is usually done in your home country, if you have filed that, and sometimes people file multiple in the 90s, right? In the 90s, people used to file multiple. They might change their name or change their date of birth, or there's so many things that happened in immigration in the 90s that's catching up to people now. Okay. So you really need to know when you filed for your visa to come to the US, or even if you're not in the US, okay? Even if you are not in the US, if you're outside of the US applying for a visa, just know that any previous applications that you have filed is there. They have access to it. It's not destroyed. You have to know your immigration history. Okay. So the second thing, after you know your immigration history and you have figured out, okay, I have nothing negative in my immigration history that could affect my case, right? Because that's why you want to know your immigration history, because you want to know if there's anything in there that could potentially affect your case. And if you're not sure, you need to find out. Right? What I typically do for clients that don't remember, if they filed something in the past in the US and they don't remember what exactly they filed, or what the result of that is. Most people know, okay, my application was denied, but I don't really remember what I applied for. That's when we do a FOIA request. That's a Freedom of Information Act request to USCIS, to basically all the agencies involved in immigration, because you really want to know what's in your A file. What does Border Patrol have on you? You want to know all those information before you even file. Okay, so that's how you could get that information if you don't have it. If you don't have a copy of what you filed, that's a way for you to get a copy of it. It's harder to get the applications for the B2 visas that are done outside of the US, but it's not impossible. Okay. Now, once you get it and you're looking at it, if there's things in there that weren't accurate, right? If you said that, because this is something that happens a lot, is people will tell you that when you're applying for a visiting visa, a student visa, all these temporary visas, that you should include children, spouses that you don't even have, because it will make your application stronger. As true as that may be, that if you have children that you're leaving in your home country, or if you have a spouse that you're leaving in your home country to come to the US temporarily, there might be an assumption that you have a reason to go back home. However, Once you get here and you decide to stay and you want to apply for a green card, that's going to be a problem. If you are applying for a green card through marriage, but you already said that you were married and you didn't get a divorce, it becomes an issue because now USCIS is going to question whether, one, were you actually married? Because if you were not actually married, that means you lied to them, and now you'll need a waiver. Two, if you were married, why didn't you get a divorce before you married your current spouse? Because now it's polygamy is an issue. So either way, knowing what's in your immigration file will save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy. Okay, so that's why that's the first step for every single client, is knowing what's in your immigration history. So the second step, okay, the second key to a successful green card application is have your documentation in order. What does this even mean? Having your documentation in order means that you know what the required documents are in your case, and you have all those documentations ready to go. Hi, Amara, welcome. Um, if you are just joining, you can ask me questions in the comments as I'm going along. I will stop and answer your questions. So don't feel that you can't ask me questions. And we are talking about the top 3 keys to a successful green card application. Okay. So have your documentation in order. I mean that literally and figuratively. Okay. You need to know what documentations you need. And you need to, if they're not in English, right? If the documentation that you have is not in English, it needs to be translated into English. You need to make sure that the documentation you have is the right documentation. So, for example, if you are from Nigeria and you were born in like the 70s, you probably got a birth certificate from the hospital. That's what you have. It worked in the past, it's fine. However, now when you want to file for a green card application or anything like that with USCIS or US immigration in general, the birth certificate that you need is no longer the one from the hospital. They want one from the national population. So it's not only having a birth certificate, it's making sure that it's issued by the right government agency. So again, having your documentation, but also making sure you have the right documentation is really the key here. Okay, that's why I say have your documentation in order, because if you have the divorce, that's another one. That's a huge deal. If you got a divorce in a foreign country, so this is different state by state. However, in Massachusetts, if you, let's say you live in Massachusetts, you went back to Nigeria, you got a divorce, you need to make sure that the person you're divorcing lives in Nigeria. If they do not live in Nigeria, the divorce is not valid in Massachusetts. Okay, so your divorce, wherever it takes place, needs to be valid where you live. So if you are in a state that it doesn't matter if you and your spouse live in the place where you're getting a divorce, then it's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and get divorced, but in a state like Massachusetts that requires that at least one of you live in the place where you're getting a divorce, you need to make sure that you're following the right procedure in getting that divorce. And I've seen this happen countless times where someone will go and get a divorce because they figured, oh yeah, we live in the US, but we got married in Nigeria. So let's go back to Nigeria and get the divorce. Well, this becomes an issue because if USCIS does not accept your divorce, that means that your marriage is not valid. So you need to then get either get a divorce or get a court in your state to say that your previous divorce is valid, right? And therefore your current marriage is valid. It's a whole thing. And you do not want to find this out after you already spent the money to file for a green card application. Because those things are not cheap. Okay? Those things are not cheap, and you do not want to be in the middle of an interview and that comes up. Now the officer is going to give you 30 days to provide a divorce decree that actually is valid. Divorces in Massachusetts, the shortest divorce you can get in Massachusetts is about 4 months, 5 months. So giving you 30 days to get the divorce decree that's valid is not enough time. So that's why you really want to know these things ahead of time, so that once you file, you know you have what you are required to have. You have the documentations. They're issued by the right authority. They are, issued by the right country, right? The right jurisdiction. They are in English. So anything that's not in English, again, needs to be translated into English. So you need to put the original, in the original language, a copy of the original language and a copy of the English translation. And it needs to be a certified translation, because they need to make sure that whoever is certifying that they translated this actually speaks both languages and it's not just making it up. Okay. So that's really, when it comes to documentation, that's the key there. It's not just knowing what the required documents are, but knowing what documents are required from your country. So each country is different. Marriage certificates, birth certificates are issued by different government agencies in each country. So you really need to know, what country you're from, what the required documents are. If there's actual, like, for some countries, there's stamps that need to be on the, let's say, the marriage certificate. There's a stamp that needs to be on it. The stamp needs to be blue, right? I'm thinking of Haiti. There's a stamp on it. It has to be blue, and it has to be, like, there's so many different things that needs to be in there. So you really want to make sure that you have that in place before you even file anything, because you don't want to come back and have to, like, go back to try to get the to get a new birth certificate so that you can file. If you're getting stuff from outside of the US, you don't know how long it's going to take. So you really want to do that ahead of time to give yourself the best possible outcome. Okay. So we have a question from Kimberlyn. Can you file for your family while your citizenship is in process? So this is a great question. The answer to this is yes. So if you have a green card and you're trying to file for your spouse or your unmarried child, yes, you can definitely file for them while your citizenship is in process. The only thing is, if the application you file for them is still in progress, while when you become a citizen, you can just update USCIS that, hey, now I'm a citizen, they're now an immediate relative, and please process their case based on my new status. Okay. But yes, definitely, if it's a spouse or children, unmarried children, you can definitely file for them while you're waiting for your citizenship to be approved. And then once that's approved, their status changes to now spouse or children of a US citizen. And depending on how quickly visas are being issued, or the availability of visas, that may even speed up their case once you become a citizen. So it really depends on who you're going to file for. As long as it's someone that you can file for as a green card holder, you're fine. Okay. So again, documentation is what we're talking about right now. You just need to make sure that your documentation is in order when you start the process. Okay, you don't want to be halfway through the process, or worse, at your interview, and find out that you need documentation that you do not have, especially when those documentations are required. Okay. So just be aware of that. So the final thing, right? I did say top three. So the third key to a successful green card application is, if you haven't guessed by now, is to ace your interview. That's really the key, right? If you know your immigration history and you know that's not going to affect your case, you know that you have all your documentation in order because you make sure that you looked at what the requirements are for your country, all your documentation that's not English translated, your divorce is valid, everything is good to go with your documentation. You sent in all the required documentation. Now it's time for an interview. And this is where your case can go off the rails. This is really, if you have everything else, your interview is really the place where you can either, can really make the difference between you getting your green card and you not getting your green card. Okay, so acing your interview is is the final key to basically getting your green card. Now, if you are getting your green card, if you're applying for a green card in the US based on marriage, please go ahead and watch my video on marriage-based interviews, because I go into detail the type of questions that you can be asked and just how to prepare for that interview. Know that when you are in your interview session, the officer is not asking you a question that they don't know the answer to. Most of the time, they're asking you questions to basically confirm what they know or what you have told them. So, for example, I had an interview where literally we had our documentation in place because my client had an interaction with the police. And she was in court. We got the court documents. We got it notarized. Like, we got all the documents that's required for someone that was that had a court case. We get to the interview. The officer gets to the question on the forms about criminal history. And she, of course, we already talked about it. You have to disclose if you have any criminal history. Even if it was dismissed, you still have to disclose it. You still have to let the officer know. And then the officer will just be like, oh, it's not a big deal because it was dismissed. So in this situation, again, client tells the officer what's going on. The officer finished the interview and basically looked at my client and said, oh, do you know what a rap sheet is? And my client sitting there not knowing what a rap sheet is. And for those that don't know, a rap sheet is basically FBI printout of all your interactions with the police, with the court system, with Border Patrol. Like, they have all of those things. So when you get your biometrics into appointment and they do your fingerprints, the reason that they're doing that is so they can run a FBI background check on you. And the officer had the printout of the results and basically showed it to my client and said, it's good that you told me about your criminal history and that you presented the documentation because I already knew. Right? So the officer already knew that my client had this history, already knew what happened with the case. So when she was asking questions about the case, she already knew the answer. She was just waiting to see if my client would be honest about it or if she wouldn't. But again, she's my client, so she knew that it was going to come up. She knew how to answer the questions, and luckily for her, she listened to me, and the officer was happy. So again, that goes to show you that when you go to your interview, They know certain things. They already know if you have a criminal history because, again, before you get to the interview, you already went and got your fingerprints taken by US immigration, whether you're in the US or you're outside of the US. Before your interview, you're going in for a biometrics appointment. And that appointment is where they will do your fingerprinting, take your picture, have it on file, and do the background check. So if you have any criminal history, whether in your country or outside of your country, if it's showing up in the database under your name, under your fingerprint, under your picture, they're able to pull that. So just be aware of that. And hi, Erin from, I think you're watching from, he said 19th Street. Well, welcome and thank you for watching from your office. Like, tell me what time it is where you are. Because we are at like 12 o'clock over here, almost 12:30. So feel free to tell me that. And then Emmanuel watching from Liberia, welcome. And yes, thank you, Erin. Peace TV is airing my lives on their page as well. So if you are watching on Peace TV, welcome. You will be seeing me every Friday, as always. And we will be getting into immigration, chatting about immigration. Again, immigration is all I do. So that's really what I have to talk to you about. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, anything, please put it in the comment section and I will respond. So thank you. Again, acing your interview. This is kind of my favorite part of the whole process because this is basically the final test. This is the final moment before my client gets their green card. Okay. Unless there's something that comes up. So again, if you know your history, you should already know if something's going to come up at the interview. If you do not know your history, you're basically walking in there blind. You don't know what the office already has. You don't know what's about to happen at your interview. But one thing always do on my interview with my clients, always go over their history again, especially paying close attention to any applications they have filed in the past. Um, I've had people that filed, like I said before, the visiting visa, multiple applications on the for a visiting visa. So knowing exactly what was said, what did you put in your application, and making sure that it was accurate. And if you put any information in there that's not accurate, I already know that that's going to come up. That's going to be an issue. And we basically start working on ways to fix it. Okay, before we even get to the interview, we already know what's going to happen and you're prepared for it. So one thing people always ask me is, if I get to the interview and it doesn't go well, what happens next? So what typically happens, so I'll take it in two ways. If you're in the US versus if you are outside of the US at a consulate. So if you're in the US, you get to your interview, there's issues, things don't go well. The officer is not going to make a decision that day. The officer is going to send you a notice of intent to deny, basically saying, here are all the reasons, right? Every single reason that I want to deny your case. Change my mind, right? So you get the opportunity to basically know, okay, the officer wants to deny my case because, for example, they don't believe my marriage is real because I couldn't remember my wife's, birthday at the interview. So now that you know that, you have the opportunity to go ahead and respond with either more documentation or statements or, all the things that you can provide to show that, okay, even though I didn't remember my wife's birthday, our marriage is still valid and it's still real, and we're still building a life together. Okay. Whether, again, this is even if your green card application is not through marriage, if it's through your child, if it's through the Liberian green card program, you can still you still get this opportunity to respond to whatever reason the officer wants to use to deny your case. Okay. And then once you respond to that, if you change the officer's mind, they will approve your case and send you the green card. If they, if you didn't change their mind, they will deny your case. You have the option to file an appeal at that point. But to file a motion to reopen if it's just a green card application. But if it's, let's say, your spouse or your child is filing for you, you have the option of filing an appeal for their application as well. So there's a process after the interview in case the officer decides that they're not really sure if they want to approve your case right away. So the interview is not the final step. Even if it didn't go well, you still have a chance. Okay. Now, I'm going to take some questions before I talk about what happens at the consulate if your application is not approved. Okay. So let's see. Erin is watching from Monrovia, and it is 4:30 over there. Wow. Okay. So Striker is asking if you came to America on a DV lottery and did not include your child and filed for your child, would there be any problem at the visa interview? Well, the problem is going to be more if you, um, let's see, for your child, no, but the question is going to be if the person that got the DV lottery actually qualified for the DV lottery. So one of the requirements for the DV lottery is that you must include all your children and your spouse. That is a requirement that disqualifies you. So if you didn't put your child, it basically disqualifies you from getting the DV lottery, and it could lead to the person being able to remain a green card holder. So it usually comes up in the citizenship stage. So if the person is still applying for citizenship and they've tried to file for a child that they had before they got their DV lottery, that's going to come up because, again, you only have one immigration file. So everything you file is going to be in there, and the officer will be looking at that to see if you actually qualify for the DV lottery and whether you should get your citizenship or not. Again, this doesn't apply if you didn't know that you had a child in the first place. So the only, the times where not including a child on the DV lottery is not a problem is when you didn't know that you had a child in the first place. So when this, for my for some of my clients, happened with, well, only really happened with the men, where they had an affair or they had a girlfriend and they broke up, the person moves away, and they find out like years later that they have a child with this person. So in those situations, not including the child in their DV lottery application is not going to be an issue because they didn't know they had a child. But if you knew you had a child and you didn't include them, that's where the problem is. Okay, so yes, it could be a problem at the visa interview. Feel free to reach out to me offline to discuss more on what options are available to you or to the person in this situation. Let me see. I'm trying to understand your question, Kimberly. The that make you citizen and your children that you file alone return citizen, is this change or still standing the same? Okay, so think I understand your question, but just correct me if I'm wrong. Your question is, if you become a citizen, will your children also be considered citizens? Well, it depends on if they are in the U.S. So it's called the law basically says if they're in the US with a green card and they're under a certain age and you have been a resident of the US for a certain amount of years, they'll be able to basically get citizenship through you, as a derivative. If you have a child outside of the US after you become a citizen, you're able to basically get them a US birth certificate at the embassy. So it really depends on, where your child is, where your citizenship is, and all of those things. So it's more there's more to it than just you getting your citizenship and your children automatically becoming citizens. There's certain qualifications that you have to meet. And again, I'm happy to talk more offline and actually give you some legal advice on what to do, and how to basically maneuver the law so that your children will be able to become citizens as well. Okay, so, oh, hi, MC. Well, welcome. So, how do you invite a sibling for a visit? So, let's see. I did a whole video on the B2 visa, but a simple breakdown is you can send basically a letter saying that if there's an event or anything like that, or if they're just coming to see family, you can send that, but that's not what's going to determine whether they get a visa or not. That's really the biggest thing here, is that they have to qualify for a visa on their own. And unfortunately, that's not something that, the individual that's in the US sending the invitation can really control. So the person that's outside of the US needs to show that they qualify, that they have ties to their home country. For example, they have good jobs, or business, that they have family, that they have ties to the community. If they are head of the church women's group or something like that, if they run a company that employs multiple people, that require their CEO basically to continue running the company, for the employees to continue having a source of livelihood, then those are the different types of things that the person would need to show in order to basically prove that they will maintain their residence in their home country. They are just coming here for a visit, and they have enough funds, enough opportunity in their home country, that they have no reason to stay here. So the invitation part is not really the key, because people have, someone that's outside of the US that wants to go to Disneyland can apply, right? They can buy their tickets, the refundable tickets to Disneyland, say, this is where I'm going. This is, I'm going to do this, or I'm going for this particular event. And they just really have to show that they meet the requirements for a visa. So the invitation, again, is not the key. It's whether the person qualifies on their own, and whether they have sufficient ties to their home country. That's what really determines whether they get the visa or not. Okay, so now I'm going to cover what happens after your interview if you unfortunately, right? If you unfortunately did not ace your interview at the consulate, what's the next step? What happens? So it depends on why you were denied, right? Let's say for example, if it is through your spouse and you go to the interview, it didn't really go well. The officer doesn't believe that your marriage is real. You didn't bring enough documentation to convince the officer. and the officer decides they're not going to approve your case. In that situation, what happens is that the case is sent back to the US, right? Once it's sent back to the US, you will get a notice of intent to refuse. So basically, it's the same as a notice of intent to deny that USCIS will send you. So, but now it's coming from the National Visa Center. They're basically saying, hey, these are the reasons that we don't believe your marriage is real. Change our minds. And you have the opportunity try to change their minds. Now, if the issue at the embassy is that the officer looks at your case and it's like, we don't really, we can't approve your case because you lied on an application before, or there was misrepresentation on a previous application, then the issue changes. So the officer will basically refuse you the visa, but give you the opportunity to apply for a waiver for the misrepresentation. Now, if you have a qualifying relative in the US, for example, if you have a spouse that's a US citizen or permanent resident, or a parent that's a US citizen or permanent resident, you can apply for a waiver. The issue is for people that don't have a qualifying relative, because you won't be able to apply for the waiver that the officer is telling you that you need to apply for in order to get the visa. So that's why I say knowing your history before you even get to the embassy is key. Some DV lottery winners have been denied because they apply for the DV lottery, and before that they apply for a visiting visa. Again, that application follows you. So if the information on your visiting visa doesn't match the information on your DV lottery, that's misrepresentation, especially if it's something that is key. For example, if on your B2 visa you said that you were married and that you had children, but on your DV lottery you put that you didn't have children and that you were not married. Yeah, maybe you got divorced, but did your children just disappear? Right? The officer is going to have questions. And if they don't like your answers to those questions, your case will be refused and you will be asked to apply for a waiver. And most people applying for a DV lottery do not have a qualifying relative like a US citizen spouse, or permanent resident spouse, or a US citizen or permanent resident parent to apply for the waiver for them. So it is really, really important that you work hard, right? To make sure that you know your history, make sure that you have your documentation in order, and finally, make sure that you ace your interview. And those are the top 3 keys to a successful green card application. Whether you're in the US or outside of the US, these things apply to you. Okay, my goal for this year with this lives is to make sure that you have the information you need. Make sure that if you qualify for a green card, that you have the information that will help you make sure that you get your green card. Okay, so if you have any questions, as always, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am happy to respond to you. If you are watching this on the replay, hi there, welcome. And feel free to leave me your questions. I do go back and respond. If you are watching this on Facebook, please feel free to join me on YouTube and just subscribe to my YouTube page so that you can get the extra videos that I put up there. We do have one live right now where I am reacting to the immigration interview scene from the proposal. So please feel free to go and check that out on my YouTube page. Again, all my information will be in the description in case you want to have a personal meeting with me and go over your immigration case. I will be able to look at your history and give you some legal advice. Okay, so I want to thank you all for joining me again on this live, and as always, I will see you next week for more immigration chat. All right, bye for now.